Melissa Turner was 51 years old, a woman who had given her best years to a marriage that ended in silence. For over 2 decades, she had been a wife, a mother, and a caretaker, roles that left little room for herself. When her husband walked out and the divorce papers were signed, Melissa thought she might feel relief. Instead, she found herself in a small, quiet house by the Florida coast, listening to the hum of the refrigerator at night and wondering how long a human heart could beat in loneliness before it simply gave up. Melissa was not invisible, though she often felt that way. Her coworkers at the local medical office saw her as dependable, efficient, the kind of woman who always remembered birthdays and covered shifts. Neighbors waved politely when she brought groceries in from the car. But no one lingered, no one asked how she was really doing. Beneath her steady smile was a hollow place that grew larger every evening she slipped between cold sheets alone. She remembered the girl she had once been. Fiery, laughing too loud at concerts, dancing barefoot in wet grass. That girl had faded under the weight of responsibility and a loveless marriage. Now, in her 50s, Melissa wanted desperately to believe it wasn't too late to find that spark again. Her friends, especially Karen, tried to caution her. "Melissa, online dating is dangerous," Karen warned one afternoon as they sat on the back porch drinking sweet tea. "Men can be anybody they want behind a screen. You don't know who you're really talking to." Melissa gave a small, tired laugh. "I know, Karen, but I'm tired of being careful all the time. I've spent years keeping my head down, doing the right thing, waiting for something good to happen. Nothing ever does. Maybe it's time I take a chance." Karen reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Just promise me you'll be smart about it." Melissa promised, though inside she knew her heart was stronger than her caution. She craved attention, conversation, someone who looked at her not as an aging woman but as a partner, a possibility. She wanted to feel wanted. At night, she created a profile on a dating site. She uploaded a photo, shoulder-length auburn hair brushed neatly, a soft smile, eyes that held both warmth and sadness. In her bio, she wrote, "Looking for companionship and laughter. Life is too short to spend alone." Messages trickled in. Some were crude, some indifferent. But then there was one that stood out. A man with sharp blue eyes, a confident grin, and a profile that spoke of yachts, travel, and success. He didn't sound like the others. He sounded deliberate. "Hello, Melissa," his first message began. "There's something about your smile. It feels real and rare. I'd love to know the woman behind it." Her chest tightened as she read those words. It had been years since anyone spoke to her like that. Hours turned into days, and their conversations deepened. He asked about her childhood, her favorite music, the beaches she loved most along the Florida coast. He told her he admired strong women, women who had endured storms but still knew how to dream. Melissa found herself laughing again, genuine, bubbling laughter she thought she'd lost forever. She stayed up late waiting for his messages, rereading them in the morning like love notes left on her pillow. The loneliness that had once pressed against her like a heavy curtain seemed to lift. For the first time in years, Melissa felt alive. She felt seen. And though her friends warned her not to get carried away, a quiet hope grew inside her. Maybe this man, this stranger who seemed to understand her better than anyone had in decades, was the chance she'd been waiting for. What Melissa didn't know was that hope, so fragile and intoxicating, was about to lead her straight into a nightmare. Melissa's phone buzzed one evening as she sat curled on her couch, a half-empty glass of wine on the coffee table. It was him again, the man who called himself Daniel. She had learned small details about him, that he loved the ocean, that he worked in international investments, that he had a taste for fine wine and long conversations under the stars. He always knew the right words, the kind that slipped past her defenses and made her feel cherished. That night, his message was different. "Melissa, you deserve more than just words on a screen. How about we meet? There's a private yacht party this weekend, nothing too crowded, just good music, good wine, and the sea. I'd love for you to join me." Her breath caught. A yacht party? It sounded like something out of a movie, not a 51-year-old secretary's life. She hesitated, staring at the blinking cursor. Karen's warnings echoed in her head. Be careful, these men can be anyone. But the loneliness of her empty living room pressed harder. She typed slowly, her fingers trembling. "Are you sure? I've never done anything like that before." The reply came instantly. That's why you should. Trust me, Melissa. One night on the water, you'll feel like the world belongs to you again. The words washed over her like a tide she couldn't resist. She wanted to feel that, to believe that after years of invisibility, she could step into a story worth telling. She agreed. The night of the party arrived. Melissa stood in front of her mirror, smoothing the fabric of a soft blue dress that complemented her auburn hair. She dabbed perfume at her wrists, something light and floral, and whispered to her reflection, "It's just one night. Maybe the start of something new." At the marina, Daniel was waiting. In person, he looked much like his photos, tall, confident, with an easy smile that immediately eased some of her nerves. He took her hand with practiced charm. "You look stunning," he said, his voice low and steady. "I knew you would." Melissa blushed, the compliment landing deeper than it should have. "Thank you. This is a little intimidating," she admitted, glancing at the gleaming yacht behind him. He leaned closer, his grip tightening around her fingers. "Don't be nervous. Tonight is about you. About making you feel alive again." Those words melted the last of her hesitation. Together, they stepped aboard. The yacht shimmered under strings of golden lights. Music pulsed from hidden speakers, smooth and intoxicating. A few other guests mingled with glasses of champagne, but Daniel's attention never wavered from Melissa. He guided her through the crowd, introducing her as if she were royalty. For the first time in years, she felt beautiful, not because of the dress or the lights, but because someone was looking at her like she mattered. As the night stretched on, Daniel leaned in close, his breath warm against her ear. "You see, this is the life you were meant for. Not loneliness, not settling. This." Melissa smiled, though a flicker of unease stirred in her chest. She wanted so badly to believe him, to believe that this glamorous man and this glittering night were real. She didn't know that behind his charm was something darker, something waiting for the moment when the music grew louder, the sea swallowed the horizon, and she would have no place left to run. The first hour felt like a dream. Melissa held a crystal flute of champagne, bubbles tickling her lips as she listened to the hum of the ocean beneath her feet. The yacht glided effortlessly into the dark expanse of water, the shoreline fading into glittering dots. The sky stretched wide and endless above, littered with stars that seemed closer than they had in years. Daniel moved beside her with practiced ease, one hand resting at the small of her back as though they had been together forever. He laughed easily, telling charming anecdotes about travels and business deals that sounded too glamorous to be true. Melissa knew part of her should be skeptical. No man this polished could be so perfect, but the warmth of the champagne and the way he looked at her made doubts slip away. "You're glowing tonight," Daniel murmured, leaning close as the boat cut across the waves. "This is the Melissa I knew was waiting to be seen." Her heart fluttered. She hadn't heard words like that in decades. They filled an emptiness she hadn't even realized was so vast. Around them, other guests mingled, but Melissa barely noticed. It felt like the whole yacht was theirs, a floating palace built just for this night. Music thumped from hidden speakers, low, seductive rhythms that seemed to pulse through her veins. Yet, beneath the laughter and glamour, Melissa sensed something unsettling. Daniel's hand lingered too firmly at her back, guiding her steps like she was a possession rather than a partner. His eyes, so blue and captivating, sometimes flickered with something sharper, like a hunter watching prey. Still, she brushed the feeling aside. After all, wasn't this what she wanted? To be wanted? As the evening deepened, Daniel led her toward a more secluded deck at the rear of the yacht. The crowd thinned, the music softened, and the ocean air whipped around them in salty gusts. Melissa shivered. Daniel shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders with a gallant smile. "See? I told you I'd take care of you." "Thank you," she whispered, pulling the fabric tighter around herself. She wanted to believe in the gesture, to hold on to the fantasy. Daniel lifted a fresh glass of wine to her lips. "Drink. Let go. Tonight is about freedom." Melissa hesitated before taking a cautious sip. The wine burned a little, heavier than the champagne, but she forced a smile. "You're tense," Daniel observed, his voice lower now, almost commanding. "Relax, Melissa. Out here, there are no rules. No one to judge. Just you and me." Something in his tone made her pulse quicken, and not in the way she expected. She tried to laugh it off. "I guess I'm not used to nights like this." His smile tightened. Then it's time you learned. The shift was subtle at first. His touch grew firmer, less affectionate, more insistent. When she tried to step back, he closed the space instantly, fingers curling around her arm. His charm dimmed, replaced by a sharpness that chilled her. Daniel, maybe I should go back inside, she said, glancing toward the glow of the main deck. He chuckled, though it was humorless this time. You don't want to leave. Not now. You came here because you wanted more, didn't you? Her throat tightened. She tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened. Please, you're hurting me. He leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. No, Melissa. I'm showing you what it means to be wanted. Fear surged through her. The laughter, the glamour, the sweet promises, it had all been bait. She realized too late that this man wasn't a rescuer or a new beginning. He was something darker, something she had unconsciously ignored in her longing to be loved. Back inside the yacht, the music grew louder, masking her quickened breaths. Other guests danced and drank, oblivious to what was happening on the shadowed deck. The ocean stretched endlessly around them, a black mirror that promised no escape. Melissa's mind raced. She thought of Karen's warning, of the nights she had whispered into the empty dark that she just wanted to feel alive again. Now, here she was, pulse hammering, alive but trapped, caught between the fantasy she had chased and the nightmare it was unraveling into. Daniel pressed closer, his voice a whisper edged with menace. Out here, no one hears you. No one saves you. It's just us, Melissa. And you belong to me tonight. Her heart pounded. The lights of the shore were long gone, swallowed by the sea. She realized, with icy clarity, that stepping onto this yacht had been more than a chance at love. It had been a step into the unknown, and she was utterly alone with a man who no longer hid what he truly was. And the night was far from over. Melissa's pulse pounded so loudly she swore the ocean itself could hear it. The glittering dream of the yacht party had dissolved, leaving only shadows, the sting of Daniel's grip on her arm, and the sick realization that she was trapped. Let me go, she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel tilted his head, studying her like a predator amused by its prey. Why would I do that? You wanted this. You came here for me. I came here for companionship, she pleaded, her breath quickening. Not this. Not whatever this is. His laugh was low, humorless. Companionship? Melissa, you're too old for fairy tales. What you wanted was to feel alive. I'm giving you exactly that. With a sudden pull, he yanked her closer. She stumbled, nearly losing her footing as the deck swayed under them. The music from inside thundered, masking her cry. She glanced toward the doorway, but no one came. The guests were still drinking, dancing, oblivious. Panic gripped her chest. She pushed at him, but his hands were unyielding, strong in a way that reminded her she had no chance of overpowering him. Daniel, please, she begged, tears stinging her eyes. I trusted you. His expression darkened. That's the thing about trust. It's a gift, and some of us know exactly how to use it. He forced her back against the rail, the cool metal pressing into her spine. The sea loomed behind her, dark, endless, merciless. For the first time that night, Melissa realized she wasn't just in danger of being hurt. She could disappear out here, vanish into the ocean without anyone noticing until it was too late. She shook her head desperately. You don't have to do this. His hand slid from her arm to her jaw, gripping her face. Oh, but I do. Because this is who I am. And tonight, you're mine. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She tried to scream, but his palm clamped over her mouth, muffling the sound into the wind. She clawed at his wrist, struggling, her nails scraping his skin, but he didn't flinch. For a split second, their eyes locked, hers wide with terror, his gleaming with something inhuman. In that moment, Melissa understood she was staring into the face of a man who had done this before. The glamour, the charm, the polished smile, it had all been a mask. The real Daniel was standing before her now, cold, violent, and merciless. She twisted, desperate, and managed to wrench free enough to gasp out. Somebody help me. The music swallowed her cry. No one heard. Daniel's grip tightened, his whisper sharp as broken glass. Scream all you want. Out here, it's just you and me. Terror surged like fire in her veins. She kicked, thrashed, every ounce of strength driven by survival. For a heartbeat, he staggered, surprised by her fight. But then his rage flared, and the world became a blur of violence. His fists, his voice, the searing pain that tore through her body as he unleashed what he had lured her here to do. Melissa's mind splintered between shock and disbelief. Just hours ago she had been laughing, sipping champagne, daring to hope for love. Now she was clinging to life itself, every second a brutal reminder of how wrong she had been to trust him. Her last coherent thought, before darkness began to close in, was not of Daniel, but of Karen's voice, gentle and warning. Be careful, Melissa. Not everyone is who they seem. The truth of those words rang louder than the crashing waves. And as the night deepened, the dream of romance was gone forever, swallowed by a nightmare that only the rising sun would reveal. Dawn broke slowly over the Florida coast, painting the horizon in muted shades of pink and gray. The marina, usually alive with chatter and the smell of salt air, was quiet except for the gulls circling overhead. A dockhand, barely awake and sipping his first coffee of the day, noticed a yacht drifting unnaturally still at the far end of the pier. Its lights were still on, faint against the rising sun. He frowned. Boats usually came back with noise, music, laughter, voices carrying across the water. But this one was silent, eerie. Curiosity tugged him down the dock until he reached the vessel. The gangway hung loosely, as though left in haste. "Hello," he called, stepping aboard. No answer. The interior smelled faintly of wine and salt, but also something heavier, something metallic that made his stomach twist. He moved cautiously, his boots tapping against the polished floor, until he reached the main cabin. That was when he saw her. Melissa lay motionless on the floor, her body twisted in a way no living body could be. The soft blue dress she had chosen so carefully the night before was torn, stained with blood. Her auburn hair fanned across the carpet, her once bright eyes staring at nothing. The dockhand dropped his coffee. His hand shook as he fumbled for his phone, dialing 911 with a voice that cracked. There's a woman on a yacht. She's not moving. You need to get here. Now." Within minutes, the marina was swarming with flashing lights. Police cruisers lined the pier, and uniformed officers moved briskly, their radios buzzing with clipped commands. Crime scene tape cordoned off the dock as detectives boarded the yacht, their faces hardening at the sight inside. Detective Harris, seasoned and unflinching, knelt beside Melissa's body. He had seen violence before, but this was different. The brutality spoke of rage, of control, of a predator who had stripped away not just life, but dignity. He murmured softly, almost to himself, "She trusted someone, and he destroyed her." Outside, bystanders gathered, whispering in horrified tones. The story spread quickly. A woman found dead on a luxury yacht, her night of romance ending in unspeakable violence. Back at the police line, Karen, Melissa's closest friend, arrived after hearing the news. She pushed against the tape, tears streaming, her voice breaking. "No, not Melissa. Please, God, not her." An officer held her back, murmuring condolences she could barely hear. Reporters soon arrived, their cameras capturing every angle of the tragedy. Headlines would scream across Florida by noon. Woman found dead on yacht after night out with mystery man. But for those who knew Melissa, it wasn't just a story. It was a heartbreak. A woman who had dared to believe in love again, who had braved loneliness for one chance at connection, had been silenced forever. The yacht, once glittering with lights and promise, now sat in grim silence, a floating crime scene. The sea lapped gently against its sides, indifferent to the horror it had carried. And as the sun climbed higher, the question hung heavy in the salt air. Who was the man she trusted? And how far had he gone to erase his trail? Detective Michael Harris had been on the force for over 20 years. He had seen crime scenes that turned the stomach, but stepping onto that yacht felt different. Something about the stillness, the flicker of golden dawn against the torn remnants of a party, made the brutality seem louder. The silence screamed. He studied Melissa's body carefully, not just as evidence, but as a story frozen in place. The bruises, the torn dress, the fear etched across her final expression. Every detail told him this wasn't a random act. This was personal, calculated. Bag every glass, every bottle. Harris instructed his team, his voice steady but edged with steel. "I want fingerprints, DNA, everything. Whoever did this didn't vanish into thin air." An officer approached with a phone they had found in Melissa's purse. Harris scrolled through her messages, his jaw tightening as he saw the recent thread. A man named Daniel. The texts were romantic at first, then possessive, then finally the invitation, one night on the yacht. Just us. Run this name through every database, Harris ordered, and cross-check with dating apps. This wasn't the first time he's done something like this. Outside, the marina buzzed with reporters, their microphones reaching like vultures. Harris ignored them, focused on the crime scene. He knew predators like this. They thrived on charm, on making women believe they were special, until they weren't. Later that morning, Harris sat across from Karen at the station. Her eyes were swollen, hands trembling as she clutched a tissue. She was so excited, Karen whispered. I told her to be careful, but she wanted to believe again. She just wanted someone to see her. Harris leaned forward, his voice gentle. Did she ever mention his last name? Anything that could help us identify him? Karen shook her head, tears spilling. No, she just called him Daniel. Said he made her laugh, made her feel young again. Harris sighed, scribbling notes. That's what men like him do. They build trust fast. Too fast. But he made a mistake. He left her here. And we'll find him. By afternoon, forensic reports started trickling in. Partial prints lifted from the wine glass, a few hairs clinging to the jacket draped over Melissa's shoulders. Pieces of a puzzle waiting to be assembled. Sir, an officer called, handing Harris a file. No Daniel registered with this yacht. It's rented, paid in cash. But we've got surveillance from the dock. Cameras caught him escorting her aboard. Harris flipped through the still images, a tall man in a tailored shirt, his arm wrapped tightly around Melissa's. The photos froze his confident smile, the mask of charm. But Harris knew masks eventually slipped. He stared at the image, committing it to memory. You can hide behind fake names, fake lives, he muttered. But the camera doesn't lie. We'll get you. That night, as Harris left the precinct, the weight of the case pressed heavy on his shoulders. He looked out at the city lights reflecting on the bay and thought of Melissa, how she had stepped onto that yacht with hope in her heart, only to meet horror instead. And in that moment, he made a quiet vow. Daniel, or whatever his real name was, would not vanish into the tide. Justice for Melissa had just begun. The name, Daniel, unraveled quickly under Detective Harris's relentless push. Within 48 hours, the pieces began to fit together. Fingerprint analysis matched a man with a string of arrests under different aliases. Fraud, assault, battery. Each charge a red flag. Each dismissed when women were too afraid or too ashamed to testify. His real name was not Daniel. It was Marcus Dalton, 43 years old. No steady job, no permanent residence. He drifted from city to city, reinventing himself each time with slick charm and stolen money. Harris stared at the file, disgust curling in his gut. Predator, he muttered, flipping through mugshots. The man's face barely changed over the years, confident eyes, arrogant grin. The kind of man who believed he could talk his way out of anything. Sir, an officer interrupted, dropping a report onto Harris's desk. We tracked his movements. Dalton rented yachts twice before in Miami and Jacksonville. Both women he took out never filed charges, but they told police he became violent when they tried to leave. One of them disappeared for weeks, too scared to come forward. Harris clenched his jaw. Melissa wasn't his first, but she had become his final cruelty. With a warrant in hand, Harris led a team to a shabby motel outside Tampa. Room 14 was rented under another fake name, but surveillance confirmed it. Dalton had checked in after leaving the marina. The hallway smelled of cigarettes and mildew as officers raised their weapons. Police. Open up. Silence. Then the sound of a window being forced open. Harris kicked in the door, splintering wood. The room reeked of sweat and stale alcohol. On the dresser sat Melissa's necklace, a silver pendant her daughter had described through tears. Dalton hadn't even bothered to hide it. Back window, an officer shouted. They tore through the room, catching a glimpse of him sprinting across the lot. Harris's chest tightened as adrenaline surged. Not this time, he thought, racing after him. The chase spilled into the street, sirens wailing as Dalton darted between cars. He was fast, desperate, but desperation made men sloppy. He cut through an alley, only to find two squad cars blocking the other end. Breathing hard, Harris stepped forward, gun drawn. It's over, Dalton. Hands where I can see them. For a moment, Dalton smirked, the same grin Melissa must have seen when she believed she was safe. But then he raised his hands slowly, theatrically, as if the entire arrest were just another performance. "You think you've got me, detective?" he said, his voice dripping arrogance. "Women come and go. You can't change that." Harris's glare was cold. "No, but I can make sure you never touch another one again." Back at the precinct, Dalton sat in interrogation, shackled but unbothered. He leaned back in his chair, eyes gleaming with defiance. Harris watched him through the glass, every muscle in his body taut with restrained fury. Melissa's face flashed in his mind, the trust she had given, the life stolen in a single night. He would not let this man twist the story. Justice was no longer just about evidence. It was about giving Melissa the voice Dalton had silenced. And Harris intended to make sure that voice thundered in court. The courthouse in downtown Tampa was packed to the rafters the morning Marcus Dalton went on trial. Reporters crowded the steps, their cameras flashing as if the spectacle itself were fuel for the fire. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Families of Dalton's past victims sat shoulder to shoulder, their faces etched with grief and solidarity. But in the front row, directly behind the prosecution's table, sat Melissa's family. Her daughter clutched her mother's silver pendant, the one Dalton had stolen and left in his motel room, as if it were a lifeline. Detective Harris watched from the aisle, his jaw set. He had chased Dalton through alleys, combed through the wreckage of his lies. But this was the moment justice would speak louder than Dalton's charm. The bailiff called the court to order. Dalton strolled in, shackled at the wrists, but smirking as though the entire proceeding were an inconvenience. He wore a suit provided by his public defender, yet his swagger remained intact. To the casual eye, he looked like any other businessman caught in an unfortunate mess. That was his mask. Harris knew better. The prosecutor, Angela Ruiz, rose to her feet. A woman known for her unflinching delivery, she wasted no time. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice steady. "This case is not about romance. It is not about a tragic accident at sea. It is about predation. It is about a man who lured vulnerable women into his orbit, who used lies and charm to gain their trust, and who destroyed them when they resisted." On the night of July 14th, Melissa Turner was one of those women, and Marcus Dalton made sure she never returned home. Her words hung heavy in the air. Jurors leaned forward. Melissa's daughter buried her face in her hands. When the defense rose, the tone shifted. Dalton's lawyer attempted to spin a different narrative. Melissa had been drinking heavily, she had become unstable, and her injuries were the result of a tragic fall during a night gone wrong. Dalton, he argued, had panicked and fled. The courtroom buzzed with disgust. Harris clenched his fists at his sides. He wanted to shout that it was a lie, but he knew the evidence would do the talking. One by one, the prosecution's witnesses painted the true picture. Forensic experts described the bruises, the torn fabric, the unmistakable signs of violent assault. The dockhand recounted the eerie silence of the yacht, his trembling voice echoing as he remembered finding Melissa's body. Then came Karen, Melissa's best friend. She walked slowly to the witness stand, her face pale but resolute. "She was so hopeful," Karen said, her voice breaking. "She told me this man made her feel alive again. I begged her to be careful. She wanted to believe love was still possible. And he..." She paused, swallowing hard as tears streaked her cheeks. "He took that hope and turned it into her nightmare." Dalton watched him passively, even amused. But when Detective Harris testified, the smirk faded. Dalton didn't just stumble into this, Harris told the jury. He planned it. He chose her. He isolated her. This was not an accident. This was a pattern of behavior that ended in murder. The jurors' eyes shifted toward Dalton, no longer seeing a man in a suit, but the predator Harris described. The trial stretched for 2 grueling weeks. Each day peeled back another layer of Dalton's lies, exposing the hollow man beneath. And when closing arguments came, Ruiz's voice thundered through the courtroom. "Melissa Turner is not here to tell her story, but we are. We must. Because if we let Marcus Dalton walk free, we are telling every woman that her trust, her hope, her life can be stolen without consequence." The room held its breath as the jury filed out to deliberate. Hours passed, thick with silence, until finally the foreman returned with the verdict. "On the charge of first-degree murder," he read, "we find the defendant guilty. The words cracked the air like thunder. Melissa's daughter wept openly. Karen clutched her hands together in prayer. Detective Harris closed his eyes, letting out a breath he had carried since the morning Melissa's body was found. For the first time, Dalton's mask slipped. The grin vanished, replaced with cold fury as the judge pronounced his sentence. Life in prison without parole. Justice had spoken. Melissa's voice, though silenced that night on the yacht, had thundered back through every witness, every piece of evidence, and every juror who refused to look away. When the gavel struck and the judge declared Marcus Dalton would spend the rest of his life behind bars, the courtroom exhaled a collective breath. For Melissa's family, it wasn't victory, it was survival. Her daughter clung to the silver pendant, tears streaming as she whispered, "Mom, you got your justice." Detective Harris stood near the back, arms folded, his face unreadable. He had seen too many verdicts, too many families broken by violence. But this one was different. He thought of Melissa's quiet smile in the photos, of her hope when she stepped onto that yacht. He promised himself that her story would not vanish into a headline. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed as the family walked down the steps. Reporters shouted questions, but Karen, Melissa's closest friend, spoke softly to the crowd. She was a woman who just wanted love, Karen said. She believed in second chances. And he took advantage of that. If there's one thing I want people to remember, it's that Melissa's kindness wasn't weakness. It was strength. He didn't break her spirit. He just revealed his own cruelty. Her words rippled through the silence, striking harder than any headline. In the weeks that followed, Melissa's name became a symbol, a story told not just in newspapers, but in living rooms, at church gatherings, and across online forums. Women shared their own fears, their own near misses with men like Dalton. Her tragedy became a warning, but also a reminder of resilience, that even in death, her voice sparked conversations that might save others. For her family, the healing was slower. Nights were still heavy with absence. Birthdays and holidays carved open wounds. But they carried her memory forward, establishing a small foundation in her name to support women navigating the uncertain world of dating and online trust. And for Harris, the case lingered long after the files were closed. Some nights, he would stand on the pier where Melissa had boarded the yacht, watching the horizon fade into darkness. He thought of how hope had lured her onto the water, and how justice had finally pulled her back to shore. Melissa Turner's life was cut short, but her story would endure. Not as the tale of a victim, but as a testament, a reminder that justice, though often delayed, can still thunder loud enough to silence even the most dangerous predator. Months after the trial, the world had moved on, as it always does. New headlines took the spotlight, new stories captured attention. But for those who loved Melissa Turner, time didn't erase. It only carved her absence deeper into their days. Her daughter often visited the small memorial near the marina where Melissa had boarded that fateful yacht. Locals kept it alive with fresh flowers, handwritten notes, and candles that flickered at night against the sea breeze. On one card, someone had written, "You deserved love, not cruelty. Rest in peace, Melissa." Karen spoke of her often at church. She reminded others that Melissa wasn't defined by the way she died, but by the way she lived, with warmth, with trust, with the stubborn belief that love was still possible. Her hope was her gift, Karen said through tears one Sunday. And if we honor that, she's never really gone. Detective Harris carried her story with him too. Every time he faced another case involving a vulnerable woman, he thought of Melissa's laughter in those early text messages, the way she dared to step out of loneliness. It steeled his resolve. Justice, he realized, wasn't just about punishment. It was about remembering the humanity of those who could no longer speak for themselves. Out of tragedy, something unexpected grew. The foundation in Melissa's name gained momentum, helping women navigate online dating safely, providing resources, and spreading awareness about predators who lurked behind charming profiles. Her story saved lives, not by choice, but by the painful lesson it left behind. At the dedication ceremony, her daughter spoke with a trembling voice. "My mom wanted love. That's all. She believed in people, even when it cost her everything. And while I wish I could have her back, I know she would want her story to help others. She would want no one else to walk into the same darkness she did." The audience rose in a standing ovation, not just for the speech, but for Melissa herself, a woman who, despite her tragic end, left behind a legacy of resilience, compassion, and truth. And so, Melissa's name lived on, not as a cautionary tale alone, but as a reminder. Even when cruelty tries to silence hope, hope has a way of speaking louder in the end.